Chad, so great to be chatting with you, man. One, I've thoroughly enjoyed learning about you. I won't lie to you. Before your book came out, I didn't know much about, Chad Veach, this superstar guy, dad, just husband, all those things, friend, as I've learned about. But what I loved is, what we're here talking about is one, your book, Help I Work with People. And I love the title. And it's partly tongue in cheek. There is no other person that can rock a stash like you. Just be honest. I mean, I got a bald head. My kids the other day, my daughter goes, Dad, you and The Rock kind of have the same smile. And I'm like, no, I have nothing like Dwayne Johnson, nothing like Vin Diesel. You have the mustache and the smile. And this is what I'm going to learn this. I mean, I've had people tell me this, that your heart is as big as your smile. And I believe it. And you have a smile that
thanks
is
for having
just,
me on.
it warms the
my
heart.
Kids,
so Chad, thanks for being here,
When my
man.
kids ask me questions about my mustache, I correct them. I say, it's my mustache. But yeah. When you got
a classic dad joke right there, dude. A classic
dad joke as far as you want, man. Just go with it. But no, it's an honor.
Yeah, just go with it,
man. Thanks so much
just
for having me.
Just go with it. So, yeah, I mean, it is exciting as I was digging through the book when it came out last fall, and I was excited, as I just shared with you. I was excited at that point to, one, at some point, hopefully have this book as part of the book club. It's going to be, here for the month of October. So stoked for that, to be able to walk through the book with others, for them, maybe if they haven't seen the book, to be introduced and read it. But one of the great things that I loved, and it's funny, as I was waiting on you to sign in, I saw this takeaway, and it's funny how these things happen. And to me, if a leader only knows this, they forget everything else they think about leading. And they know this, and it's the key takeaway from becoming their biggest cheerleader is be people's biggest cheerleader by believing in them and helping them believe in themselves. If you just tattoo that on everyone's forehead that's a leader,
well,
we're all better off, right?
Never changed anyone. Shame only points out the worst in us. Most people, we only hear what we're not, but we crave to hear who we really are. And so I think people are so down on themselves already. They're already people, they just beat themselves up. So you got to pull out the best in them. That's what honor does. When I honor you and I honor your time, I receive the best version of you. So I think you got to become people's biggest cheerleader because they are not their biggest cheerleader. I'm not the biggest cheerleader in my life. I need voices, sources, strengths of encouragement. So I don't know anybody that woke up today and is like, my biggest problem is I'm just way too encouraged. No, I know everyone I know is a little bit discouraged. Mm-hmm. So you got to become people's biggest cheerleader and help them believe in themselves.
Yeah, it goes along with the comment that, how do you know when people need encouragement? It's like, are they breathing? I mean, if they're alive, they need encouragement, and that's it. So let me ask you this: is obviously those that come in and read the book with us, we'll dig through it and get through all the pieces and parts. And I love in my journey how much I've had to grow in insecurity and growth in my insecurities and empathy. And you talk a lot about it during your book. What do you think, to hinge on this key takeaway, what do you think holds people back from being the cheerleader of others?
There's something inside of us that's threatened that if somebody else wins, I lose. So if their light is shining, that means my light is diminishing. And it's just a lie. It's such a fabricated lie. So I think we're threatened by the success of others. We're threatened by the confidence or the accolades or, I'm a big faith person. And so Saul in the Bible, to use a biblical example, there's this guy, David, young guy, he's killing it. He's the upstart. He's the guy, he's blown up on Instagram or TikTok, whatever you want. And they're singing his praises. And that threatened his boss because his boss Saul thought, if the young guy wins, I lose. Saul should have rewired his mind to think that guy's winning and he's on our team. If he wins, we win. If the people love him, that means our kingdom and our ecosystem's flying. But we all have a twinge of insecurity, and if that goes unchecked, it grows into a gaping, massive, wide insecurity. And so, listen, when it comes to insecurity, all of us have it. Like you said about every human's breathing needs encouragement. Every human, we all recognize I'm flawed. I'm not as cool. I'm not as good. I'm not as talented. I'm not as successful. So we all have a twinge of insecurity. That's fine. We just can't let it turn into jealousy, comparison, unhealthy competitive nature. We got to really let it be checked by humility, by being grounded. And if we do, see, because when I really embrace my gifts and I love my life, I can celebrate it and go, I don't want to be anybody else. So I'm glad, Tyler, that you're doing well. But I got to be honest, I wouldn't trade my life for anybody else's. I'm glad you have what you have, but I'm really thankful for what I have. That's health.
It's, I had a former guest and we talked about this, and he goes, talking about tragedies in life. And we've all gone through something. And, he talked about an issue as a child, a traumatic experience. And he goes, in order to really take that and make it something powerful, I had to decide to use gratitude as a weapon. And he said, I'm grateful I went through the experience, because just as you shared, I'm grateful for who I am. And know that I could be this person, I can be this cheerleader, because only I can see what I can see, because I was designed to see what only I can see, and be grateful for that. It's like, Chad, I don't want to sit in your seat, because if I'm trying to sit in your seat, then I'm blind to what I'm seeing. And I think that's the whole idea of leadership in this context of help I work with people. And I kind of want to take a tangent here, because I think a lot of times people, they look at, someone leads a church, pastor, right? And they're like, that's different. That's different. Well, my background, agriculture, I was a nutritionist for cows. And here I'm talking about leadership podcast, right? And that's what I love, helping people and serving people. And what I realized long ago is it was never cows. It was never the four-legged problems. It was always the two-legged problems. And, the reality is, as you write this, it doesn't matter what industry, anyone that's listening in, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. I can guarantee there's at least one other person. And if there's not one other person, there's at least you. And you talk about that in your book. You got to start leading yourself. And that's the hardest person to lead. But it's this idea, it doesn't matter where you're at. We're all people. And if we learn about people and we're curious about people and we grow together and we're accepting, like, hey, this is who I am. Now, how can I use who I am and help others? Well, that's when we can start to really grow in our leadership.
Absolutely.
Is that what you've experienced
and I
as
think,
well?
It's about trying to develop a healthy mentality. That's why I consume all of Colin's content, because the healthier my mindset becomes. We tend to think such negative thoughts. And I think it's like we think 90% of our thoughts go negative, and of those, 80% are reoccurring. So how do I retrain my mind to think well, to get healthy, to get sharp, to get bright, the mind's so powerful. Colin was teaching me this recently. Our good friend Colin Henderson, the greatest of the greats, consume all of his content. He said the mind only keeps track of failure, not success. For every negative comment we hear, you need 5 positives to erase the one negative. So I think we got to really get our minds out of the gutter so we can get healthy. And the more healthy I am, the better shot I have at leadership, whether it's cows, 4 legs or 2.
Yeah. It's, the thought I thought of there as you talked about that is, I've helped coach my son's soccer team and coaching those kids. It's like, you can see it more in kids. We can, adults have kind of created this armor, and that can be a hindrance for them, but kids, you can see it. And when you, correct a kid, you can just see their kind of spirit, crumble a little bit. But when you cheerlead, when you, tell them good job, when you, really, praise them, you'll see them accomplish things that they never thought they could. And I think it happens in all people. It's just we see it in kids. As a dad, I imagine you've seen that with your kids. It's like if you get harsh on them and you're like, oh, why did you do that? But then as opposed to when you celebrate them, man, how much different they are. And it really comes back to this idea of being a cheerleader and
I heard
and
someone say
focusing
about
on those
parenting,
areas.
if I speak to the fool in my kid, I'll get the fool. But if I talk to the king inside of my child, I'll draw out the king. So it's my responsibility to pull out the best in others. But I'll never do that. It's impossible unless I believe the best about myself.
Yeah. And that's where it starts from is how you view yourself is how you view others. I think, is something that you shared along these lines is, people live in the real world. They're just not your world, is I think how you said it and wrote it. And I believe that it's, so often we have this perception idea of, well, this is what other people think about me. It's like the reality is they're not thinking that much about you, one. And number two is, what they think about you is probably way different than what you think about yourself. And, it's when we can fall into that, and instead of making up these stories, again, choosing to lead ourselves, well, then that frees us up to do a better job of really leading others because we're not trying to protect ourselves in that process.
Powerful, 100%. And so I think, so think about the journey of leadership. And what is the quest? The quest is to make as big of an impact as possible. Well, if I want to make an impact and I want to influence, I want to lead well. The requirement is first, if I can, this is the hardest part of leadership. It's not the others. They're not the problem. I'm the problem. It's like, I write about this in the book, but the blame game, it's so futile. I'd love to play the blame game. It gets me nowhere. I am involved in every one of my problems. And so I've got to figure it out. I got to get counselors to help me. I got to get the right reading materials. I got to get inspiration. I got information. I got to figure it out because if I can crack this code, if I can figure out, okay, I need this many hours of sleep. I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. I need this much exercise. I need this much coffee. Colin had this great line. I could be an agent for Colin. He's got the best. He said, what are your MITs? Most important tasks. Every person has 3 tasks they do every day that if they do these 3, they're at their optimum level. So I got to be unapologetic with my MITs. That I do my most important tasks so that I'm sharp, I'm firing. I come in confident. People don't follow the competent person, they follow the confident person. So how do I build that confidence in myself so when I come to lead, I got a clear conscience. I've wrestled with my why. I know I'm here to serve and add value. I'm not threatened. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Well, I believe that's so much the power of discipline and consistency. And people hear that and they freak out. But you just laid out why it's important. Because if you're one person today and you're a different person tomorrow, and it's, you've talked about in your books and, sports guy, I'm not even going to go LeBron, but, I'm from Ohio. So, he was there first. Anyways, when talking about, taking care of your body and finding that, it's like, building into those rhythms that is going to allow you to perform. And if we shortchange that, that's when all of a sudden we show up one day one way and the next day we're totally different because we're stressed out and we woke up late, this or that. Well, that doesn't help us care about people, right? That doesn't help us show up in our best way because then it starts being about us as opposed to, I'm here to focus on Chad today. How can I, really get the most out of Chad that he has to share because of the journey you've gone through? But if we're worried about, I'm behind on this and that, and whatever else it may be that I didn't follow my routine to be ready to show up and perform, just like athletes learn that, is what you're talking about.
I think we gotta also learn how to talk to ourselves. The whole thing about leadership is I can't listen to myself. I have to talk to myself. So if I don't, I'll listen to myself, and these thoughts will talk me out of greatness. I have to talk to myself into greatness. And so I think that's one of the most important skills of a great leader is learning that ability to have the rehearsal and the disciplines of what I say when I talk to myself. Going into a big meeting, going into, even for my line of work, I'm first a pastor. I first am a communicator of, the scriptures. So before I preach, I remind myself of what God has said over me. I remind myself of who the big deal is today. It's not me. It's another hero. I'm pointing everybody to the real solution, and it's not my gift. I gotta go through some disciplines and some rehearsals to get everything in line so I'm prepared. It's the old saying, preparation brings forth freedom. We don't sweat we do sweat. We sweat in preparation so we don't bleed in battle. If I don't put all the sweat in preparation, I get to that battle, I'm gonna get kicked in the mouth. We're gonna have a tough time. Yeah. So that preparation, that rehearsal, talking ourselves into greatness. So when I'm available with somebody, it's clear eyes. It's a sharp edge. And people should leave and go, wow, the eye contact. When Jesus talked, they marveled at two things. They could not believe the grace in which he spoke, but they could not believe the authority that was on his life. Well, how do you think he got grace and authority? Sleeping in? Kind of going off the cuff? No, this was a disciplined, submitted person.
Yeah. Intentional and deliberate. And, that's what follows through. Because as you consistently show up, that's how people are going to then decide to follow you, because they know that they're not going to be led around in the desert and wilderness for 40 years. So, yeah. Share if you wouldn't mind, you share a little bit in the book, but share about some of your journey in growing as a leader. And I guess I'm aware enough to know that every day isn't perfect for Chad. And, what are some of the things that challenges you've had at times as being a leader and really, kind of these lessons that helped write this book that help I work with people?
Well, what I didn't you write a book called Help I Work with People, and boy, that'll haunt you. Now, staff that wants to leave the staff, and you go, wait a second, I thought you were the guy that wrote on working with people. How come somebody wants to leave? So, yeah, I've been, working with people obviously my whole life, but in professionally for over 2 decades. And you learn, maybe I didn't handle that right. Maybe I should have been a better communicator. Maybe my expectations weren't clear there. Maybe, we all have conflict. I'm not afraid of conflict, but do you have resolution? How quick are you to resolve problems? So, yeah, I have failed. All of any leader, your biggest failure will never be a budget. It will never be an event. It's like this football team that just bamboozled ESPN, Bishop Sycamore. Have you seen this thing? Yeah. It's like
I heard about
ESPN's
that.
biggest
Yeah, I heard
wonder.
about that.
Will it be the fact bamboozled them and they got to play on ESPN? No, it'll be how did they handle Keith Olbermann or Dan Patrick, or how did they handle Colin Coward? It's always people. So Rachel Nick, yeah, it's people.
Maria Taylor.
It's not.
You just go down the list. Come on, man.
I'm using an example with them, but it's for me the same.
Yeah. Well, what I think I hear there is like, eventually you can rewrite history as you talk about, and it's a history between people. But if your pattern is that, well, then your history catches up with you. And eventually you can have all the bright stars. You can have everything you want. You can have, culture is king. However, if behind the scenes, you're not treating people with, integrity and honesty and humility and all those things, at a certain point, if you continue to just use people as a widget, it's going to catch up to you. And that's what I hear is like, it's how you handle, you're going to screw up. I'm going to screw up. I'm going to screw up probably a couple times yet today. I mean, I have 3 kids and a wife. Come on, I'm going to screw up somehow. And it's more of, how do I handle it? Do I get defensive or say, you know what? All right, I dealt with that. But then what can I do as part of this coming back to, the routine and, the MIT is what can I make sure that I put in place to frame myself in so I'm learning and growing so I don't repeat it again.
The real catch.
And asking for grace there.
Is how do I move past the common hurdles in my life? A lot of the problems that each of us deal with, these are not new problems. These are the haunting ones. These are the recurring. These are my snags. These are my habits. This is my propensity. This is my real weakness. And so we got to spend time being vulnerable, being authentic, being transparent with ourselves first. And then by the way, if I don't have a shot at being honest with others if I'm not honest with myself. The more I am vulnerable with me and transparent about disappointment, about failure, about hurt, that really hurt my feelings when they did that. They let me down, man. I did not see that ending up that way. If I can confess that to me, I can confess that to others. So part of being a positive leader does not mean I am unaware of hardship, difficulty, failure. It's that I'm processing it in a healthy way so that I can get healed from that stuff. The problem with not dealing with that stuff is we become a shell of who we're really called to be. And we start to have all these layers. And then pretty soon you see it with leaders. No one can get close to them because they're not even close to themselves.
Yeah. They've put on such this armor, such this shell. In my opinion of that, it's all that burden of insecurity. And it's when we take that insecurity, we set it aside. We're willing to throw our arms in the air. As Brad Lomenick has shared, show your pit stains because we all have them and just say, this is who I am. And you know what? I'm cool with that because I've taken my insecurity. I've admitted it. I've recognized how it shows up. To me, that's when, again, this display that you talk a lot about, which I agree completely, of being a healthy leader is practicing healthy empathy. And, that's when we're willing to throw our arms up, put it around people that we can practice.
Blessed, very lucky.
How have you seen that play out in your life?
A special needs daughter. I don't know if I had a lot of empathy before her. I don't think, that was really on my radar. I think someone to be very, kind of afraid of is an aspirational leader. Someone that's on the climb, that's aspiring to be great. They're kind of willing to do anything and everything to be great. That will get worked out of you when you get married, have children, experience failure, and for me, it was my special needs daughter that I kind of went, hey, let's slow your roll here. Life's bigger than you and what you want to accomplish. And all of a sudden I woke up to a world and I go, wow, everyone's in pain. How come nobody told me? It was the first time I was in pain. So I think leading with empathy is so crucial. And I'm grateful that life touches everybody. Life happens to all of us. And when life touches you, you lead broken. You lead with empathy. It's like there's no superhero cape on any great leader. In fact, I always think people admire your strengths, but they relate with your weaknesses. So it's not that they want you to be weak. They can just relate when you're weak. And I think that allows them to follow you. That you're not perfect. You have also problems and you care about them when they're weak. So I think empathy is a big deal and it makes you very attractive.
it's a piece I had to learn. I think you share the example, and I'll share this, and I've shared this with the podcast audience before, but you had that experience, and that opened your eyes to, open your arms and say, oh, okay, others are hurting, whatever else. For me, my experience is I put my head down and pushed, because I was just going to push myself through. And what I found is I push people away. And I think this experience I think that is a dichotomy that happens with people. There's people that can be enlightened through their process, or there are people that can respond and say, I'm just going to push through this no matter what, because I just have to survive and get through. And I was lucky, many, many years later, decades later, that this was kind of open and exposed to me. And it's like, here in this process of just trying to push through life, which a lot of leaders can be in a position if they're, insecure, if they're just trying to prove yourself. Like you said, that leader that's just trying to get somewhere. So I have value. You can end up pushing people away. And what you just said is the other side of that, where it's like, maybe you've been, head in the clouds or not, you haven't seen it. And yet through an experience, through your daughter, this beautiful, gift that you've been given to say, oh, there's difference in the world. I need to look at that and embrace it.
Because I just think we lead
that's going to help me see others in a much
until we
bigger,
try to
way.
Put ourselves in other people's shoes. And when you're an empathetic leader, you're thinking about, how do they feel? What are they going through? What is driving their behavior? What's on their radar in this season? When you go through hard times, it makes you pause and think about others. And I'm really grateful. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a great question.
The
word compassion always comes to mind when I think about empathy. So I always think empathy is having compassion for other people.
Okay. I have this belief. I believe in this world today that there are two words that are the most, I would say, misdefined or understood words. It's not great communicating. Forgive me there. But empathy and humility, we just don't comprehend. I believe as a society, you look at it, you go to C.S. Lewis, and it's like humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less, thinking of others more. You kind of grow through a process where, through experiences, you're like, okay, how does humility live out? Because it's not being standing in the back of the line, always to stand in the back of the line. Sometimes you need to stand in front as a leader, but it's understanding when to do that. To me, that's a practice of humility. This definition of empathy to me is putting your arm around people. Because when you're willing to put your arm around someone, you're willing to go with them. You don't have to own it. Let me play this out. You don't have to take on your daughter's, condition in order that you can be empathetic. But you can put your arm around her and you can appreciate her and accept her. You can look and see what she's going through and know that, she has value. She's bringing value to your life, which has impacted tens of hundreds of thousands of others. That's how her life is valuable. To me, that's that practice of empathy. It's like if you and I were walking together and I put my arm around you, I can't go faster than you. And if you're going faster than me, it's not going to work either. We have to walk together, and there has to be that appreciation of each other, but we're still independent, but yet we're walking together. To me, when I think about it and layer that in, that's how I define empathy. But yet when you're callous and hard, you're not being empathetic. That. And when you're a doormat and just letting people walk all over you, you're not being empathetic. Yeah. Well, I mean, you talk a lot about in your book, so I appreciate that you're recognizing and as I'm learning and seeing that empathy is one of the greatest
couldn't
skills
agree more.
A healthy leader
agree more that
can display.
It's the thing that we need. In these days, in these times, when you see anyone fighting on social media, all you're telling me is that you don't operate in empathy. Your heart's not going out towards others.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're choosing protect yourself rather than being willing to sit down and see what they see. And maybe it's different. Maybe it's the same. But, you know, as I've heard, there's no two eyes that see everything the same. There's no two, you know, sets of ears that hear everything the same. Everyone's a little different. And, you know, it's being tuned into that makes an orchestra. It's being tuned into that makes a amazing light show.
Oh.
But, Chad, thanks for joining, man. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you giving me some time, our audience as well, getting to know you a little bit better. I hope there's another time. And
I appreciate it so
keep
much.
Keep doing what you're doing. Keep shining your light.
You got to come down and hang
as
out
the
and
leader
say hi.
that you are.
And if I'm ever in Spokompton, I'm come on, man. Thanks so much for having me on.